attitude is everything. It shapes how you show up. It colors how you see the world. It influences how you respond to failure, how you carry momentum, how you lead, how you recover, and how you live. It's not just a mood, it's a muscle. And most people don't even realize they have the power to shape it. They think attitude is something you're born with, or something that rises and falls with your circumstances. But that's not how it works. A winning attitude is something you build, brick by brick, day by day. You've seen it. People with less talent but more grit. People with more pressure but more optimism. People who walk into the room and raise the energy. Not because everything in their life is perfect, but because they've trained themselves to show up that way. That's not luck. That's work. That's practice. That's mindset. And this is what separates the people who grow from the people who stall. Not intelligence, not opportunity, not connections. It's attitude. Because attitude drives behavior. Behavior drives decisions. And decisions shape everything else. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need a motivational speech every morning. You need a mindset that's wired to win. One that's built for challenges, trained for pressure, and grounded in discipline. Most people don't think of attitude as a habit, but it is. It's a collection of beliefs, tones, self-talk, posture, assumptions, and emotional reflexes that get rehearsed every single day. And whatever you rehearse most becomes your default. So if you wake up thinking small, rehearsing doubt, repeating failure, you don't just have a bad day, you build a bad pattern. And that pattern becomes the story you live inside. But if you shift that pattern, everything changes. When you choose to build a mindset that expects growth, that looks for opportunity, that takes responsibility, that leads with enthusiasm, even when life doesn't hand you reasons to smile, you become dangerous. You become resilient. You become magnetic. Not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. You don't wait for a good mood. You create one. You don't wait for life to treat you better. You treat life differently. This doesn't mean ignoring pain. It doesn't mean pretending everything's fine. A winning attitude isn't fake positivity. It's real perspective. It's strength under control. It's choosing to face the facts without surrendering to them. It's leading with energy that lifts instead of energy that drains. And it's remembering that your attitude affects everyone around you. Your family, your team, your clients, your friends. Your presence changes rooms one way or another. The question is, what kind of energy are you bringing with you? You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to feel amazing every day. But you do need to decide what kind of person you want to be when life gets tough. What kind of mindset you want to carry when things don't go your way. What kind of voice you want to speak with when fear starts whispering again. That decision, that posture, is the foundation of a winning attitude. And when you build that attitude on purpose, not just in theory, but in daily practice, you stop being controlled by your environment. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop waiting and start leading. Because now you're not hoping for a better day. You're showing up as the person who creates one. The first method to cultivate a winning attitude is to master your self-talk. Because the words you speak to yourself are not just sounds in your head. They are instructions. They shape how you feel, how you act, and what you believe you're capable of. And most people have no idea how negative their internal language has become. They think they're being realistic. They think they're protecting themselves from disappointment. But really, they're rehearsing failure before life even has a chance to challenge them. The most powerful person in your life is you, and the most influential voice in your life is yours. So when you speak to yourself with doubt, with shame, with pessimism, with sarcasm, your brain listens. It takes it as truth. It starts to build identity around it. You think you're being careful, but really you're becoming limited. Because your words are painting a picture your future self has to walk into. That's why you have to audit your language, the tone, the phrasing, the assumptions. If someone else talked to you the way you talk to yourself in your low moments, would you want them in your life? If the answer is no, then why are you letting that voice be the one that leads? Why are you allowing it to narrate your life story? You can't afford to let negativity become your inner soundtrack, because attitude follows language. You cannot walk in confidence while you're thinking in defeat. You cannot move in clarity while you're speaking in confusion. You cannot win while you're whispering reasons why you'll probably lose. So you change the pattern. You start by noticing. Not judging, just noticing. You hear yourself say, "I always mess this up," and you pause. You catch the phrase, "I'm not good at this," and you question it. You hear yourself defaulting to, "This is just how I am," and you challenge it, not with fake hype, with better truth, with aligned truth, with words that reflect who you're becoming, not who you've been. This takes work. It takes repetition. It takes discipline. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. You start catching negative patterns faster. You start rewiring your brain in real time. You start replacing judgment with leadership, shame with strength, pessimism with possibility. You begin speaking with direction, with intention, with language that builds instead of breaks, words that energize instead of drain. You don't have to wait until you feel good to speak powerfully. You speak powerfully so you can feel differently. You lead yourself with language. And you don't have to be loud. You don't have to chant mantras. You just have to tell yourself the truth in a way that lifts you instead of limiting you. You have to decide that the voice in your head will become your ally, not your enemy. That it will speak with clarity, not confusion. That it will speak with purpose, not pity. When you build this habit, your entire day shifts. You stop dreading challenges. You start talking to yourself like someone who's built for them. You stop shrinking when things get uncomfortable. You start coaching yourself through it. You stop spiraling in fear. You start grounding yourself in focus. And over time, that voice becomes automatic. It becomes normal. It becomes your default. Not because life gets easier, but because you've trained your brain to respond differently. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to win every day. But you do need to stop letting your inner language keep you stuck. So write a better script. And repeat it until you believe it, until it feels like yours, until it sounds like strength. Because the voice you believe most is the one you hear the most. Make sure that voice is building something you actually want to live in. The second method to cultivate a winning attitude is to shift from expectation to appreciation. Because disappointment doesn't come from what happens. It comes from what you expected to happen. You thought it would be easier. You thought it would come faster. You thought they'd support you. You thought it would work the first time. And when it didn't, you didn't just feel the loss. You felt robbed. You felt let down. You felt like life failed you. But life didn't fail you. Your expectations did. They weren't wrong, but they were unexamined. They were rooted in assumption, not in strategy. And if you live in expectation without awareness, your attitude will always be fragile. It'll swing up and down based on how closely the world matches your picture. Appreciation, on the other hand, is steady. It doesn't demand. It recognizes. It magnifies what's working, even when there's still work to do. It says, I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm grateful I'm not where I used to be. It says, I'm not owed anything, but I've been given a lot. And that mindset, that habit, it creates energy that sustains you. It doesn't just make you feel good, it makes you strong. A winning attitude is never built from entitlement. It's built from gratitude. The people who endure the hardest seasons, the ones who keep growing, the ones who stay clear and consistent, they've learned to find something to appreciate no matter what's going on around them. Not because everything is okay, but because they refuse to give their power away to circumstances. They've trained their minds to focus on progress, not just perfection, to see lessons, not just losses, to see people, not just problems, to wake up every day and look for what's right, not just what's missing. That shift isn't weakness, it's power, because it keeps you in the game when everything around you says you should be bitter, angry, hopeless, or done. You don't have to ignore pain to practice appreciation. You don't have to pretend everything is great. You just have to look for what's good, for what's useful, for what's growing. You have to stop rehearsing everything that's wrong and start reinforcing what's right, even if it's small, even if it's quiet, even if no one else sees it yet. You start appreciating the opportunity to show up again, the lesson in the setback, the people who stayed, the small progress you made, the growth in your mindset, the discipline you didn't used to have, the fact that you're still standing, still trying, still breathing, still building. Gratitude is not just something you feel, it's something you practice. It's a muscle you flex, you write it, you speak it, you train your eyes to look for it, you train your brain to feed on it. And the more you practice it, the more available it becomes. The more natural it feels, the more your attitude becomes rooted in what's true instead of what's missing. This shift protects you from bitterness, from burnout, from the story that says, if it's not going how I imagined, it's not worth it. Gratitude pulls you out of that lie. It grounds you in what's working. It reminds you why you started. It keeps your heart soft when the world feels hard. It gives you access to strength without needing everything to be perfect. Because perfect never comes. Perfect doesn't exist, but presence does. Progress does. And when your attitude is built on appreciation instead of expectation, you stop resenting the process and you start partnering with it. You stop needing constant wins to feel worthy. You stop waiting for the world to cooperate before you show up with peace and purpose. So you build this habit. You make gratitude your default, not someday, not just on holidays, not just when things go your way, but daily, repeatedly, intentionally, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Because gratitude isn't just a response to good things. It's a seed that produces them. The third method to cultivate a winning attitude is to stop taking things personally. Because the moment you internalize everything, you give away your power. You turn every challenge into a character attack, every delay into a declaration of your worth, every disagreement into a personal rejection. And when that becomes your pattern, your emotional life becomes chaotic. Every day becomes a battle to protect your identity from perceived offense. The truth is, most of what happens around you has very little to do with you. People aren't thinking about you nearly as much as you think they are. They're dealing with their own storms, their own fears, their own wounds. And when you learn to see life through that lens, everything softens. You don't stop caring, but you stop collapsing. A winning attitude is rooted in resilience, not fragility. It doesn't crumble every time someone misunderstands you. It doesn't get derailed every time someone doesn't applaud. It doesn't waste energy crafting elaborate stories about why things went wrong or what people really meant. It doesn't spin every inconvenience into an identity crisis. You need thicker skin, not a colder heart, but a stronger filter, a better internal boundary. So when the world comes at you with criticism, confusion, or chaos, you can hold your center. You can say, that's not mine to carry. You can say, that's about them, not me. You can say, this moment is hard, but it doesn't define me. When you take everything personally, you stop seeing clearly. You react instead of respond. You speak from pain instead of principle. You spiral over things that don't deserve your attention. You create meaning where there was only misunderstanding, and it costs you in energy, in clarity, in peace, in power. But when you learn to zoom out, to pause, to breathe, to separate who you are from what's happening, you become more grounded. You can hear feedback without folding. You can navigate conflict without combusting. You can handle critique without letting it fracture your self-worth. And you stop being so easily offended, not because you don't care, but because you've learned that offense is a choice, that being triggered doesn't mean you have to react, that people's words only land deeply if they hit an unhealed wound. And when you recognize that, you start healing instead of reacting. You stop giving strangers access to your nervous system. You stop letting people who don't know you narrate your story. You stop letting one bad moment become a bad mood, then a bad day, then a bad identity. You stop absorbing what doesn't belong to you. This habit requires self-awareness, humility, grace. It requires you to stop assuming the worst, to stop expecting attack, to stop projecting your fears onto every interaction. You learn to slow the story down, to ask, is this actually about me? To remember, I don't have to accept every opinion as truth. And when you start living this way, your attitude becomes bulletproof. You don't crumble every time the wind shifts. You don't spend hours overthinking a comment, an email, a conversation. You let things pass through you. You take what's useful and leave what isn't. You lead from a steady place. This doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. It makes you efficient. It keeps you focused. It protects your peace. Because now your energy is directed toward growth, not defense. Toward creativity, not insecurity. Toward leadership, not self-preservation. So train this habit. Pause before you internalize. Breathe before you react. Ask better questions. Don't take things personally just because they hurt. Not everything painful is personal. Sometimes it's just life. And life is not obligated to protect your ego. But you are responsible for protecting your own power. The fourth method to cultivate a winning attitude is to take full ownership of everything in your control and release everything that isn't. This is where personal power lives. Not in pretending life is perfect, but in refusing to be passive. Not in controlling every detail, but in leading yourself through every storm. Ownership is not about blame, it's about responsibility. It's about maturity. It's about agency. Most people go through life on autopilot, responding to circumstances like a pinball, bouncing from trigger to trigger, waiting for the environment to improve before they feel empowered. But if your attitude is tied to what happens around you, it's fragile. It will rise and fall with your surroundings. And that's no way to live. That's a reactive existence, not a life of intention. A winning attitude begins with one belief: I am responsible for me, my energy, my effort, my choices, my reactions, my habits, my responses, my momentum. No one else is coming to save me. No one else is coming to manage my focus. No one else is going to rescue me from my excuses. And that belief, it shifts everything. You stop pointing fingers. You stop waiting for people to behave differently before you step into who you want to be. You stop outsourcing your emotional state to what others do or don't do. You take the wheel. You lead yourself. You say, I don't get to control everything, but I always get to decide how I show up. This habit forces you to stop being a victim of your story and start becoming the author of it. Because it's easy to blame circumstances for a bad attitude. It's easy to say, this happened to me, or they made me feel this way. But the moment you do that, you give your power away. You become a bystander in your own life. Ownership is the opposite. It says, this is mine to lead, even when it's hard, even when it's unfair, even when it's painful, especially when it's painful. Because pain without ownership becomes suffering. But pain with ownership becomes growth. It becomes fuel. It becomes wisdom. This habit doesn't mean you control others. It doesn't mean you tolerate abuse. It doesn't mean you carry what's not yours. It means you draw a clear line between what you can influence and what you can't, and you pour your energy into the former. You focus on your discipline, your mindset, your tone, your preparation, your planning, your perspective. You stop trying to micromanage the outcome and start mastering your input. You realize you can't force results, but you can shape the conditions that make them possible. You don't wait for external motivation. You build internal alignment. You don't complain about the conditions. You adapt. You respond. You pivot. You don't let obstacles derail you. You reframe them. You turn them into training. You use them to stretch your capacity. This kind of attitude builds confidence. Not fake confidence, not puffed up ego, but grounded, quiet, strong confidence. Because when you take ownership, you stop wondering if life is going to work out. You start making it work. You stop asking if you're capable. You start proving it. And over time, that proof compounds. Your wins may be small at first, but they grow. Your consistency builds momentum. Your focus deepens. And eventually, the people around you notice. They see that you're no longer reactive. You're proactive. You're centered. You're intentional. And that presence, it changes rooms. Because a person who owns their choices becomes a person who shapes their future. And that's where legacy begins. Not in what happens to you, but in how you respond. Not in what others give you, but in what you give to yourself. Ownership is freedom. Ownership is fire. Ownership is the ground zero of a winning attitude. The fifth method to cultivate a winning attitude is to choose discipline over emotion. Because the gap between where you are and where you want to be will not be closed by how you feel. It will be closed by what you do. And your ability to do what needs to be done regardless of how you feel in the moment is the defining trait of someone who wins consistently. Most people live at the mercy of their emotions. If they feel good, they perform well. If they feel tired, they fall off. If they feel discouraged, they pull back. If they feel unmotivated, they stop showing up. And over time, they begin to build a life that looks exactly like their mood swings. But a winning attitude doesn't come from emotion. It comes from repetition, from structure, from rhythm, from values that override feelings, from actions that align with identity, not with passing moods. You can't build anything lasting if you only work when you feel like it. Discipline is what keeps you consistent when your emotions are inconsistent. This doesn't mean you ignore your emotions. It means you don't obey all of them. You lead them. You process them. You feel them, but you don't let them decide what kind of day you're going to have. You don't let them choose your tone, your effort, or your execution. You say, I feel this, but I still act from principle, not from pain. Discipline says, I already decided. That's what makes it so powerful. It removes the daily internal debate. It removes the exhausting back and forth. It removes the question, do I feel like it today? Discipline already answered that. We go anyway. And the more you do that, the easier it becomes. Because discipline compounds. It doesn't just build habits, it builds identity. And identity becomes your emotional anchor. When you know who you are, you stop asking your feelings for permission. You start aligning your behavior with the future you're building, not the mood you're in. This is how you gain momentum, not by waiting for inspiration, but by being dependable. Dependable to yourself, dependable to your vision, dependable to the plan you made when your head was clear. Discipline turns your good days into great ones, and it turns your bad days into average ones. It raises your floor. And that's the key, raising the floor, not just the ceiling. Everyone focuses on the peaks, on the high energy moments, on the big wins. But real greatness is built in your average day. It's not about how high you can go when everything's working. It's about how solid you stay when it's not. Discipline is what makes your average day better than most people's best. And it's trained. Through the small choices, you wake up when you said you would. You finish the task even though you're tired. You choose the hard thing because it's the right thing. You lead yourself through the dip instead of letting the dip lead you. And every time you do that, you build trust. That self-trust, that's what makes you dangerous. That's what makes your attitude resilient. You don't need everything to feel right to do what's right. You don't need the perfect setup. You don't need external pressure. You don't need a good mood. You just need the commitment you already made. And once that commitment becomes a habit, once it becomes part of who you are, your emotions stop having the final word. You learn to feel fear and still act, to feel doubt and still move, to feel discouraged and still follow through. Not because it's easy, but because it's who you've decided to be. So you build this muscle, one rep at a time, one morning at a time, one task at a time. And as your discipline grows, your life starts to change. You stop needing motivation to move. You stop needing a good day to take action. You stop needing the stars to align to make progress. You just move. The sixth method to cultivate a winning attitude is to surround yourself with people who expect more from you, not less. Because your mindset doesn't just come from inside. It's shaped by the energy around you, by the people you allow into your conversations, by the standards they keep, by the language they speak. And if you spend enough time around people who normalize mediocrity, you'll start lowering your own standard without even realizing it. Attitude is contagious. Mindset is contagious. Energy is contagious. So if you want to grow, if you want to build something strong and lasting, you have to be ruthless about your circle, about who has access to your thoughts, about who you let speak into your vision, about whose approval you chase and whose standards you start adopting. Most people aren't bad. They're just not building what you're building. They're not aiming where you're aiming. They're not running at the same pace. And if you try to carry them with you, if you try to water yourself down so they feel comfortable, if you spend all your time explaining instead of executing, you'll burn out. Not because you're wrong, but because you're not aligned. A winning attitude doesn't just need support. It needs challenge. It needs sharpening. It needs people around you who don't let you off the hook, who won't let you lie to yourself, who aren't impressed by your excuses, who love you enough to correct you, who care about your future more than your feelings in the moment. This kind of circle doesn't always feel good, but it always produces growth. These are the people who remind you of your standard when you start slipping, who see through your distractions, who call out your patterns, who don't just celebrate your wins, they ask you what's next, not because they're pushing pressure, but because they believe in your potential. And it goes both ways. You become this kind of person too. You show up with truth and grace. You encourage, but you don't enable. You support, but you also speak up. You tell your people the truth they need to hear. You raise the temperature in the room, not lower it to make things easy. You bring clarity when things get cloudy. When you build this kind of environment where growth is normal, where feedback is welcomed, where people talk in vision instead of gossip, your attitude becomes unshakable because you're no longer trying to hold your standard alone. It's supported, it's reinforced, it's mirrored in the lives around you. But if you're the most focused person in your circle is the problem. If you're the only one chasing discipline, the only one talking vision, the only one correcting behavior, you're not in a circle. You're carrying a crowd, and a crowd will drain you, but the right circle will build you. So you start choosing people based on alignment, not just history, based on values, not just proximity, based on who they're becoming, not just who they used to be. You let go of relationships that keep you rooted in an old version of yourself. You open space for the people who will challenge the next version forward. This shift is uncomfortable. You will outgrow people. You will disappoint some. You will have to walk away from environments where average is enough, but you do it with love, with clarity, with compassion, but with conviction, because you know what's at stake if you don't. And the reward? Your energy sharpens, your pace increases, your identity stabilizes. You become surrounded by people who believe in your future, who hold you to your word, who challenge your complacency, who speak to your highest self, not just your current state. And that habit of protecting your environment, of curating your conversations, of choosing your circle on purpose, is what keeps your attitude from drifting. It reinforces everything else you're building. It makes the hard days easier. It makes the good days more fulfilling. It turns your discipline into culture. You've seen now that a winning attitude is not a gift. It's a choice, not a feeling. It's a habit. It doesn't come from your circumstances. It comes from your standards. It's not what happens to you that defines your mindset. It's what you decide to do with it. And if you want to live differently, lead differently, perform differently, love differently, then your attitude has to become non-negotiable, not optional, not seasonal, not mood-based, foundational, grounded, reliable. And that reliability doesn't show up all at once. It's trained, layered, reinforced. You don't need to master all 6 of these methods overnight, but you do need to start living inside them. You need to start noticing your self-talk and changing it from reaction to leadership. You need to start replacing fragile expectations with resilient appreciation. You need to stop taking things personally and start moving with perspective. You need to own what's yours and release what isn't. You need to lead yourself with discipline when your emotions don't cooperate. And you need to protect your environment like your future depends on it, because it does. All of it matters. All of it compounds. And none of it happens by accident. This isn't about pretending to be positive. This isn't about ignoring real problems. This is about building real strength, quiet strength, the kind that doesn't depend on perfect conditions, the kind that doesn't require applause, the kind that doesn't fade when life gets heavy. Because that's what a winning attitude really is. It's consistency under pressure. It's grace under fire. It's focus in the middle of distraction. It's leadership when no one is looking. It's making decisions from your values instead of your circumstances. And once you've built that, once you've trained that, once you've chosen that, your entire life moves differently. Your energy shifts. Your presence changes. Your discipline becomes sharper. Your opportunities increase, not because the world gave you something new, but because you became someone new. So now it's yours to carry. No one else can do this work for you, but no one else gets to take the credit for it either. This is your habit to build, your mindset to shape, your standard to set. And when you live it daily, not occasionally, you stop chasing greatness. You start living from it.